Stop. Imagine watching a mafia boss's fiancée throw a helpless maid into a giant mirror, only to realize she had just crossed the one man no one in America dared betray. What happened next didn't just end an engagement. It uncovered a secret that threatened an entire criminal empire. Stay with me, because this story will stay with you long after it's over. Welcome back, family. If you're new here, you're officially part of our family now. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves powerful emotional stories. And don't forget to tell me what country you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing our family from all around the world. Now, let's begin. Nobody noticed Olivia. For 2 years she had quietly worked inside Bellini Manor, the luxurious estate of Don Luciano Bellini, one of America's most feared mafia bosses. She arrived before sunrise, left after dark, and never complained. Every dollar she earned went to keeping her younger brother, Anthony, alive. At only 17, Anthony suffered from a serious heart condition that demanded costly medication and regular hospital visits. Olivia dreamed of becoming a nurse one day, so every spare dollar she had was carefully saved for nursing school. Don Luciano Bellini wasn't feared because he shouted. He was feared because he never had to. His empire had been built on discipline, loyalty, and absolute respect. He had one unbreakable code: never harm innocent people, never betray your family, and never break your word. Those who did rarely received a second chance. Standing beside him through every difficult decision was his oldest friend and trusted advisor, Vince Romano, a man Luciano believed would never betray him. His fiancée, Samantha, couldn't have been more different. Beautiful and admired by high society, she treated the household staff with open disrespect. She insulted cooks, embarrassed servers, and constantly humiliated Olivia over the smallest mistakes. Olivia stayed silent because losing her job meant risking Anthony's life. Luciano often noticed Samantha's behavior, but with their engagement celebration only a day away, he convinced himself it was nothing more than wedding stress. He believed the pressure would pass. He had no idea the woman he planned to marry was hiding far darker secrets. As the mansion prepared for the biggest celebration of the year, Samantha woke up already angry, and before the night was over, one act of cruelty would shatter far more than a mirror. By sunset, Bellini Manor looked less like a home and more like a palace built for kings. Crystal chandeliers glowed above polished marble floors while a string quartet filled the air with soft music. Luxury cars rolled through the iron gates one after another, bringing some of the most powerful people in the country. Mafia captains arrived in tailored suits, respected politicians shook hands with wealthy businessmen, judges, celebrities, and influential figures exchanged polite smiles as expensive champagne flowed without end. Everyone wanted to be seen at Don Luciano Bellini's engagement celebration because an invitation into his home was a sign of trust very few people ever received. Luciano welcomed each guest with calm confidence, speaking little but noticing everything. His sharp eyes scanned every corner of the ballroom, watching conversations, reading expressions, measuring loyalty the way only a seasoned mafia boss could. Years in his world had taught him that danger rarely announced itself with loud voices. It hid behind friendly smiles and firm handshakes. Standing only a few steps behind him was his oldest friend and trusted advisor, Vince Romano. For nearly 20 years, Vince had stood beside Luciano through bloody wars, dangerous negotiations, and impossible decisions. The two men barely needed words to understand each other. One glance was often enough. Guests admired their friendship, calling them brothers in everything except blood. Samantha played the perfect hostess, greeting important guests with elegant smiles that never reached her eyes. As Luciano spoke with a visiting senator, Samantha briefly looked across the room toward Vince. For only a second, their eyes met. Vince gave the slightest nod before quickly looking away. It happened so fast that nobody seemed to notice. Nobody except the audience watching this story. Across the ballroom, Olivia quietly refilled glasses, collected empty plates, and stayed invisible like she always did. Then her phone vibrated inside her apron pocket. It was Anthony. Feeling dizzy again. Don't worry, I'll be okay. Her heart tightened instantly. She slipped into a quiet hallway and quickly called him. Anthony tried to sound brave, insisting he had already taken his medicine, but Olivia could hear the weakness in his voice. She gently reminded him to drink water, lock the apartment door, and promise to call her if things became worse. After ending the call, she took a deep breath, straightened her uniform, and hurried back toward the ballroom, hoping no one had noticed she was gone. But the moment she stepped back inside, she froze. Samantha was standing directly in front of her, and the look on her face made Olivia realize this night was about to become a nightmare. Samantha folded her arms and stared at Olivia with open disgust. "Where have you been?" she asked loudly enough for nearby guests to turn their heads. Olivia lowered her eyes and answered politely. "I'm sorry, ma'am. My younger brother wasn't feeling well. I only stepped away for a moment to make sure he was all right." Samantha let out a cold laugh that echoed through the hallway. "Do you honestly think anyone here cares about your family? You're paid to work, not to waste time on personal problems." Several guests exchanged uncomfortable glances, but no one spoke. Olivia apologized once more and quietly tried to walk past her, hoping to return to work before the situation grew worse. "I wasn't finished talking to you," Samantha snapped. Olivia stopped and slowly turned around. Samantha stepped closer until they were only inches apart. "People like you should remember your place. You're nothing but a maid. You're replaceable. Worthless." Every word landed like a slap. Olivia felt hundreds of eyes on her but refused to argue. She simply whispered, "I'm sorry." That quiet answer somehow made Samantha even angrier. Without warning, Samantha grabbed Olivia's arm with both hands and violently shoved her backward. Olivia lost her balance. For one terrifying second she reached for something to hold on to, but there was nothing behind her except an enormous antique mirror that had decorated Bellini Manor for generations. Her back crashed into it with tremendous force. The mirror exploded into thousands of glittering pieces. The deafening sound silenced the entire ballroom. Jagged glass rained across the polished marble floor as Olivia collapsed among the shattered pieces. A long shard sliced deeply across her palm when she instinctively tried to protect herself. Blood immediately stained her uniform. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The musicians stopped playing. Waiters stood frozen. Expensive glasses hung motionless in trembling hands. One by one, guests slowly lifted their phones, recording the horrifying scene unfolding before them. Samantha stood over Olivia, breathing heavily, her face twisted with anger instead of regret. Olivia stared at the blood running across her trembling hand, too shocked to cry, too humiliated to speak. At that exact moment, Don Luciano Bellini stepped through the crowd. He saw the broken mirror. He saw the blood. He saw Olivia sitting helplessly on the floor. And he saw the woman he intended to marry standing over her. His expression didn't change. His eyes became colder than anyone in the room had ever seen. Without saying a single word, Luciano began walking toward them, and the silence inside Bellini Manor became more terrifying than any scream. The silence inside Bellini Manor was so heavy that no one dared take another step. Don Luciano Bellini walked through the crowd with calm, measured steps until he reached Olivia. Without the slightest hesitation, the feared Mafia boss dropped to one knee beside the injured maid. His expensive suit pressed against the broken glass scattered across the marble floor, but he paid it no attention. His eyes remained fixed on Olivia's bleeding hand. Carefully, he removed a crisp white handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it around the deep cut, applying gentle pressure to slow the bleeding. "Don't move," he said quietly. "You're safe now." His voice carried no panic, only absolute control. Olivia looked at him in disbelief. She had worked in his mansion for 2 years, yet never imagined the most powerful man in the room would be the first to kneel beside her. Luciano raised his head just enough to speak to his security team without taking his eyes off Olivia. "Call an ambulance. Now." His order was calm, but every guard moved instantly. Nobody questioned him. Nobody delayed. Samantha finally found her voice. "Luciano, she embarrassed me in front of everyone. She walked away while I was speaking." Luciano said nothing. He continued holding the handkerchief against Olivia's wound as though Samantha's words didn't exist. That silence frightened the room more than anger ever could. Samantha stepped closer. "Did you hear me?" Slowly, Luciano stood to his feet. Only then did he look at Samantha. There was no shouting. No dramatic outburst. Just cold disappointment. "You put your hands on an innocent woman inside my home," he said. "You spilled her blood under my roof." Samantha tried to defend herself, but Luciano raised one hand, ending her excuses before they began. "Enough." Every guest stood frozen. Even the Mafia captains avoided looking directly at him. "From this moment," Luciano continued, "you are no longer welcome in this house." Samantha's face turned pale. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying our engagement is over." A wave of shock spread through the ballroom. Several guests gasped while others stared in complete disbelief. Samantha's eyes filled with panic. "You're ending everything, over a maid?" Luciano answered without hesitation. "No. I'm ending it because today you revealed the kind of person you truly are." Security quietly stepped beside Samantha as Luciano turned back toward Olivia. The arriving paramedics rushed inside and carefully began treating her injured hand. Across the room, Vince Romano watched every second unfold. His face remained calm, but behind his composed expression was something unexpected. He wasn't angry that Samantha had been thrown out. He wasn't surprised the engagement was over. He looked worried. Deeply worried. And long after the guests had gone home, while Bellini Manor sat in uneasy silence, a trusted guard knocked on Luciano's office door with information that would change everything. Long after the flashing cameras, the ambulance, and the shocked guests had disappeared, Bellini Manor fell into an uneasy silence. Don Luciano Bellini sat alone in his private office, the broken mirror replaying in his mind over and over. He had witnessed violence before. He had survived wars between rival families and betrayals that had cost men their lives. But seeing an innocent woman bleeding on the floor of his own home because of someone he trusted felt different. A quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." 3 of his oldest security men stepped inside and closed the door behind them. None of them spoke immediately. Finally, the oldest guard cleared his throat. "Don, there's something you should have known a long time ago." Luciano slowly looked up. "Then tell me now." The guard exchanged nervous glances with the others before speaking. "Miss Samantha has been mistreating the household staff for months. Tonight wasn't the first time." Luciano remained silent, allowing the man to continue. "She insulted cooks, shoved a housekeeper last winter, threw a serving tray at one of the waiters, and made several employees cry. Most never reported it because they feared losing their jobs." Another guard quietly added, 5 workers resigned within the past year because of her. They never blamed Samantha directly. They simply disappeared. Luciano felt a weight settle inside his chest. He thought back to every moment he had dismissed as wedding stress. Every uncomfortable expression he had ignored. Every opportunity he had missed to ask one simple question. He had built an empire by noticing details, yet somehow he had been blind inside his own home. After several long seconds, he stood and walked toward the window overlooking the dark estate. "Bring me every surveillance recording from this mansion covering the last 6 months, he said calmly. "Every hallway. Every entrance. Every room with cameras." The guards nodded immediately. Luciano turned back toward them, his expression colder than before. "And send my most trusted investigators. Quietly. I want to know everywhere Samantha goes, everyone she meets, every phone call, every secret. No mistakes. No rumors. Only facts." "Yes, Don." The guards left as silently as they had arrived. Luciano remained standing in the darkness, staring into the night, unaware that the office door had not completely closed. Hidden just beyond the hallway stood Vince Romano. He had heard enough to understand exactly what Luciano had ordered. His face remained calm, but his breathing became slightly heavier. Without making a sound, Vince turned and walked away before anyone noticed him. Less than an hour later, a private phone hidden inside a luxury apartment began to ring. Samantha answered. The voice on the other end spoke only 6 words. "Luciano has started investigating you." Suddenly, everything changed. Don Luciano Bellini's investigators were the best for one reason: they knew how to disappear. They never questioned orders. They simply watched, listened, and reported facts. For the next several days, Samantha had no idea she was being followed. Every movement was carefully documented. Every destination was photographed. Every conversation was quietly noted. The reports began arriving one after another. Samantha wasn't spending her days with wedding planners or family as she claimed. Instead, she held secret meetings in quiet cafes on the edge of the city, visited luxury hotels under false names, and left through private exits minutes before security cameras could clearly capture her face. Even more suspicious were the encrypted messages sent from a second phone that no one in Bellini Manor knew she owned. Luciano read every report without interruption. Nothing in the file proved betrayal, not yet. Then another envelope arrived. Inside were photographs taken outside an exclusive hotel. Samantha stepped out of a black sedan wearing sunglasses and a long coat. A few minutes later, another familiar figure entered through a separate entrance. Vince Romano. Luciano studied the photographs carefully. His oldest friend. The man he had trusted for decades. Hours later, both left together through the underground parking garage. There was no longer any room for coincidence. The investigators continued watching. 3 more meetings followed. Each one more secretive than the last. Then came the evidence that shattered what little trust remained. A hidden recording device placed inside a private meeting room captured voices that left no doubt. Samantha laughed softly before saying, "Once Luciano is gone, no one will question you taking control." Vince answered without hesitation. "His captains already trust me. When the time comes, they'll follow whoever keeps the empire standing." Samantha's voice grew colder. "I never loved him. I only needed his name, his money, and his power. You were always the one I wanted." A long silence followed before Vince spoke again. "The engagement gave us access to everything. One more move, and Bellini's empire belongs to us." Luciano listened to the recording twice. Then a third time. Not because he doubted what he had heard, but because he wanted to be certain emotion wasn't clouding his judgment. His investigators had uncovered more than an affair. They had uncovered a conspiracy. The woman he intended to marry and the man he had called his brother weren't simply betraying his trust. They were planning to eliminate him and seize everything he had spent a lifetime building. The room remained completely silent as Luciano placed the recording back into the evidence folder. He slowly closed it with both hands. His breathing never changed. His face revealed nothing. But those who truly knew Don Luciano Bellini understood one terrifying truth: his calmest moments were always the most dangerous. Don Luciano Bellini did something no one expected. He said nothing. He never confronted Samantha. He never questioned Vince. He never even hinted that he knew the truth. At breakfast he greeted his captains as usual. He attended meetings, approved shipments, settled disputes, and carried himself with the same calm authority that had made his name feared across the country. To everyone watching, life inside Bellini Manor appeared completely normal. Samantha relaxed, convinced the investigation had ended without finding anything. Vince became even more confident, believing his careful planning had kept him safely beyond suspicion. Neither of them realized they were walking exactly where Luciano wanted them to walk. Behind closed doors, however, everything had changed. One by one, Luciano summoned the men who had stood beside him for years. Not in large groups, never in predictable places. A captain was invited to a quiet warehouse. Another met him inside an empty restaurant before sunrise. Others were called to an old vineyard outside the city. Each meeting lasted only minutes. Luciano asked the same simple question every time. "If someone inside this family betrayed me, where would your loyalty stand?" None of the captains knew why he was asking, but every answer was carefully observed. Some answered without hesitation. Others lowered their eyes before speaking. Luciano wasn't listening only to their words. He was watching their faces, their breathing, their silence. In his world, loyalty was never measured by promises. It was revealed under pressure. By the end of the week, he knew exactly who he could trust and who deserved closer attention. Quiet instructions followed. Security around the estate was strengthened without explanation. Trusted men were placed where traitors least expected them. Financial records were secretly protected. Sensitive documents quietly disappeared from the mansion. Every move was made so naturally that Samantha and Vince noticed nothing. They continued meeting in secret, smiling across dinner tables, pretending everything was unfolding according to their plan. Samantha believed she was only days away from becoming the woman who ruled Bellini's empire. Vince imagined himself sitting in Luciano's chair, giving orders to the very men who still called Luciano Don. Neither understood that every step they took was already being anticipated. Luciano had stopped reacting. He had started planning. And when a mafia boss stopped speaking, people who truly knew him understood that judgment was already on its way. At the end of the week, handwritten invitations were quietly delivered to every captain, every senior advisor, Samantha, and Vince. The message contained only one sentence. Tomorrow night, we settle the future of this family. Attendance is not optional. Every captain arrived exactly on time. The atmosphere inside the private meeting hall was colder than anyone could remember. Samantha entered with practiced confidence, wearing a calm smile. Vince followed moments later, greeting the captains as though it were just another family meeting. Don Luciano Bellini sat quietly at the head of the long table. His face revealed nothing. When the doors closed, every guard took position. No one was allowed to leave. Luciano slowly looked around the room before speaking. For years, I believed loyalty was the strongest foundation of this family. His voice was calm. I was wrong. The room fell silent. He nodded once toward a trusted guard. A television screen lowered from the ceiling. Surveillance photographs appeared one after another. Samantha entering luxury hotels under false names. Vince arriving minutes later. Secret meetings. Late-night embraces. Hidden entrances. Hidden exits. Samantha's confident smile disappeared. Vince remained motionless, but his hands slowly tightened beneath the table. Luciano spoke again. Perhaps you believe this proves only an affair. Another nod. New evidence appeared. Bank transfers. Offshore accounts. Financial records showing millions quietly moved through shell companies connected to Samantha and Vince. Several captains exchanged stunned looks. Then came the final recording. Samantha's voice filled the room. Once Luciano is gone, everything belongs to us. Vince answered without hesitation. His empire will survive, under my control. The recording ended. No one spoke. The silence felt heavier than concrete. Luciano looked directly at Samantha. Tell them I'm wrong. Samantha lowered her head for several seconds before slowly looking back at him. There was no fear left in her eyes. Only resentment. You want the truth, she said quietly. Fine. I never loved you. Several captains stared in disbelief. Samantha continued. I loved Vince long before I met you. Marrying you was the easiest way to get close to your money, your influence, and your empire. Once you were gone, everything would belong to us. Luciano shifted his gaze toward Vince. And you? Vince let out a slow breath. I grew tired of standing behind another man's chair. It was the first honest thing he had said all evening. Around the table, trusted captains looked at one another in complete shock. Men who had survived decades together suddenly realized the greatest threat had never come from rival families. It had been sitting beside their dawn all along. Luciano remained silent for a long moment. Then, he slowly pushed back his chair and rose to his feet. No one moved. Every person in that room understood exactly what betrayal meant inside the Bellini family, and every eye turned toward the man whose judgment would decide what happened next. No one dared break the silence. Every captain waited for Don Luciano Bellini to speak. When he finally did, his voice remained calm, steady, and controlled. Power built through betrayal never lasts. He looked first at Vince. From this moment, you are no longer my advisor. Your authority ends here. Your access to this family ends here. You will never again speak in my name. Then his eyes settled on Samantha. You were welcomed into my home with trust and respect. You repaid both with lies. He paused before continuing. Leave this house, and never return. Security quietly stepped forward. There were no raised voices, no struggle, and no celebration. Samantha looked toward Vince, hoping he would say something, but he remained silent, finally realizing that every choice they had made had led them to this moment. Together they walked out of Bellini Manor with nothing except the consequences of their own greed. The heavy doors closed behind them, and with that sound, one chapter of Luciano's life ended forever. He dismissed the meeting and asked the remaining captains to stay behind. Looking around the table, he said, "This family survived tonight because loyalty proved stronger than ambition. Never forget that the greatest threat to an empire rarely comes from outside its walls." Every captain nodded. None of them would ever forget what they had witnessed. Over the following weeks, Luciano quietly rebuilt the leadership of the Bellini family. Positions once held by men seeking power were given to those who had consistently demonstrated honesty and discipline. Business continued without chaos because the foundation of the organization had never been money alone. It had always been trust. Late one evening, Luciano stood alone on the balcony overlooking the estate. The mansion was peaceful again, yet his thoughts were anything but. He replayed every conversation he had shared with Samantha, every decision made beside Vince, wondering how close he had come to losing everything. Then another face entered his thoughts. Olivia. She had worked under his roof for 2 years without asking for favors, without seeking attention, and without expecting anything beyond the opportunity to earn an honest living. While others had wanted his influence, his fortune, or his empire, Olivia had wanted only enough to care for Anthony and chase her dream of becoming a nurse. For the first time in many years, Luciano realized the rarest form of loyalty wasn't bought with power. It was revealed through quiet character. Several months passed. Winter slowly gave way to spring. One quiet afternoon, as Luciano reviewed paperwork inside his office, his secretary entered carrying a single envelope addressed in elegant handwriting. Inside was an invitation that immediately caught his attention. It was from Olivia, and it would lead him somewhere he never expected. Several months later, the auditorium buzzed with proud families and excited graduates. Sitting quietly in the third row was Don Luciano Bellini. Unlike the powerful man the city feared, he wore a simple dark suit and kept a low profile. In his hands rested a small bouquet of white roses. No expensive gift. No grand display. Just a quiet gesture of respect. When Olivia's name was called, she walked across the stage wearing her nursing uniform with tears shining in her eyes. Every difficult shift, every sleepless night, every sacrifice for Anthony had finally led to this moment. As she accepted her diploma, the audience applauded, but one pair of hands clapped louder than the rest. Luciano smiled with quiet pride. After the ceremony, Olivia spotted him waiting near the entrance. For a brief moment she looked surprised, then genuinely happy. Luciano handed her the white roses. "Congratulations," he said softly. "You earned every one of these." Olivia thanked him with a smile that needed no rehearsed words. Nearby, Anthony laughed as he walked toward them. Months of successful treatment had restored both his strength and his hope. Seeing him healthy was the greatest gift Olivia could have imagined. The three of them talked for a while, not as a mafia boss, a maid, and her brother, but simply as people whose lives had crossed in unexpected ways. As the weeks became months, Luciano and Olivia remained in touch. Sometimes they shared coffee. Sometimes they talked about Anthony's future or Olivia's first days working as a nurse. Their friendship grew naturally, built on honesty, respect, and quiet understanding instead of promises or grand gestures. Neither rushed to define what the future would become. They simply appreciated the peace they had both fought so hard to find. Looking back, Luciano realized that the night Samantha shattered the mirror had also shattered the illusion he had been living. It forced him to see the people around him for who they truly were. Some sought power. Some chased wealth. And a very rare few simply chose kindness, even when no one was watching. If this story taught us anything, it's this: an empire is rarely destroyed by enemies outside its walls. It begins to fall the moment loyalty disappears from within. The strongest people aren't always the loudest or the richest. Sometimes they're the quiet ones who keep choosing kindness when life gives them every reason to become bitter. If this story touched your heart, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who would enjoy it, and subscribe for more emotional stories every week. Before you go, tell me in the comments, what country are you watching from, and which moment in this story stayed with you the most? Thank you for being part of this family. Until next time. Take care of yourselves, and take care of each other.